You didn't click this because life was hard. You clicked because something in you changed after it was. The psychology you're about to hear isn't about trauma as damage. It's about what happens when a person survives too much and doesn't come back the same shape. By the end of this, you'll understand why people who've endured excess loss, pressure, or betrayal don't become louder, they become quieter. Why they don't seek attention, they withdraw from it. And why this withdrawal isn't weakness, but a reorganization of the psyche most people never experience. This isn't motivational, it's observational. Philosophers noticed it. Analysts mapped it. History is filled with men who crossed this internal line and never fully returned. Because once you see the machinery beneath human behavior, you can't unsee it. Here's the twist most people miss. Suffering doesn't harden everyone. For some, it deepens perception. And perception is isolating. If you don't understand this shift, you'll keep mislabeling yourself as broken, antisocial, or too intense. You'll keep trying to re-enter rooms you've already outgrown. Stay with this, because what you're feeling isn't collapse. It's the moment before a psychological descent begins. And identities quietly die. There is a line most people never cross. Not because they are protected, but because their lives never apply enough pressure to push them there. You crossed it without ceremony. It isn't marked by a single event. It's cumulative. Loss stacked on loss. Disillusion layered over hope. Betrayal that didn't shock you, because by then you expected it. At some point, the psyche stops reacting and starts restructuring. This is the threshold. Before it, pain still asks questions. After it, pain becomes information. You begin to notice something unsettling. Your emotional responses slow down, not from numbness, but from pattern recognition. You've seen this sequence before. You know where it ends. So your nervous system no longer wastes energy pretending otherwise. This is why people who've gone through too much often appear distant, detached, or unreadable. Their reactions aren't missing. They're delayed, filtered through a deeper internal process that now evaluates meaning instead of emotion. At this threshold, the inner world becomes heavier than the outer one. Social rituals feel thin. Conversations repeat themselves. The same desires circulate endlessly among people who haven't been forced to look past them. You don't feel superior. You feel out of place. This is the moment when the personality you built to survive society begins to fracture. Because it was designed for a world that no longer feels real to you. Most retreat here, not consciously, quietly. They reduce exposure. They observe more than they speak. They stop volunteering their inner life to people who can't metabolize it. This threshold is rarely named because it can't be explained without being lived. And once crossed, there is no clean return. Only a deeper descent into something far less social and far more honest. After the threshold, the change isn't dramatic, it's subtle. And that's what makes it permanent. Your inner dialogue slows, not because there's less going on, but because it's no longer chaotic. The noise falls away, and what remains is a quiet, watchful presence that notices things before you consciously react. You begin observing yourself the way you once observed others. This is the internal shift. Emotions still arise, but they don't flood. They pass through a deeper chamber first. You feel anger, but you also see its structure. You feel attachment, but you sense its expiration date. Every impulse arrives carrying its own autopsy. What changes most is trust, not in others, but in appearances. You stop taking behavior at face value. Tone matters more than words. Timing matters more than intention. You sense when someone is performing a version of themselves rather than speaking from it. This is why your reactions confuse people now. They expect immediacy, agreement, outrage, reassurance. Instead, they get pause, silence, a look that lingers half a second too long. Internally, something else is happening. Your identity loosens. Roles you once inhabited, friend, partner, achiever, rebel, start to feel provisional, useful but not true. You realize how much of who you were was shaped by what you needed to survive at the time. And once that realization takes hold, the psyche does something radical. It stops protecting the old self. You don't announce this. You don't dramatize it. You simply stop defending versions of yourself that no longer fit the terrain you're in. From the outside, it looks like withdrawal. From the inside, it feels like a private recalibration, as if the mind is quietly clearing space for something unnamed. Not improvement, not healing. Something more dangerous. Something that doesn't need approval to exist. This shift is not free. What no one tells you is that deeper perception extracts a toll long before it offers clarity. The cost isn't dramatic suffering, it's erosion. A slow thinning of your tolerance for what once passed as connection, ambition, or meaning. You start losing interest in things without consciously deciding to. Status feels hollow. Praise feels misplaced. Even conflict loses its charge, because you can already see the script playing out behind it. And with that loss comes something heavier than pain. Distance, not physical distance, psychological distance. You sit in conversations and feel ahead of them, not intellectually, but temporally. You know where the sentence is going before it finishes. You sense the emotional outcome before the story reaches its point. This doesn't make you arrogant. It makes you tired. Relationships begin to change shape, not because others betray you, but because they remain where they are. You're no longer wounded by this, just aware of it. The most expensive cost is this: you lose the ability to unsee. Once the mind reorganizes at this level, innocence doesn't return. You notice how much of human interaction is compensation. People speaking to avoid silence, working to avoid themselves, desiring to avoid stillness. And this awareness creates a quiet loneliness that can't be solved socially. You could be surrounded and still feel unsheltered. Not because you need more people, but because fewer and fewer can meet you at the altitude your perception now occupies. This is why people who've gone through too much often feel as though life has slowed down, while everyone else is rushing forward. They're not stuck. They're paying the cost of depth, which is time, energy, and the loss of easy belonging. And once paid, the psyche doesn't refund it. It only moves you further inward. The consequences don't arrive all at once. They unfold quietly, over months, sometimes years, until one day you realize your life looks different without you ever making a dramatic decision. Your social circle shrinks, not from conflict, but from irrelevance. Conversations that once felt normal now feel performative. You begin choosing silence over explanation. Not because you're guarded, but because translating your inner world into language feels like dilution. You become selective with attention. Crowds drain you. Noise feels intrusive. Even pleasure requires filtering. You notice that most stimulation is designed to keep people from noticing themselves, and you can no longer participate in that bargain. Work changes too. You either detach from ambition or pursue it with a colder precision, not to prove anything, but to maintain autonomy. You stop chasing validation and start protecting space. Time becomes valuable, not for productivity, but for internal coherence. Emotionally, something strange happens. You feel less reactive, yet more sensitive. You register undercurrents others miss. A shift in tone. A glance held too long. an inconsistency between words and behavior. This makes you harder to deceive, but also harder to relax around. People sense this. They may describe you as intense, distant, or hard to read. Some are drawn to it. Others recoil without knowing why. You become a mirror they didn't ask to look into. The most lasting consequence is existential. You stop measuring life by milestones and start measuring it by alignment. Moments either feel true or they don't. And once that internal compass calibrates, you can't fake direction again. This is where many misunderstand themselves. They think they've lost something, but what's actually happening is subtler and more final. Your psyche has reorganized around depth instead of belonging. And depth doesn't negotiate with the surface world. It simply watches what survives without it. At this stage, a choice presents itself, but not as a decision you sit down and make. It emerges as a tension you can no longer ignore. You feel it when you notice how easy it would be to disappear into observation alone, to live quietly, untouched, psychologically insulated from the demands and disappointments of others. There is safety here, control, a kind of sterile peace. And there is the other direction, not a return to who you were, but an engagement from a different center. One where you participate without pretending, connect without dissolving, and act without asking to be understood. This is the choice. Remain internally sovereign, untouched, but increasingly removed from life. Or allow yourself to be involved again, knowing you'll never be naive, spontaneous, or unguarded in the old way. Neither option is moral. Neither is superior. One simply preserves the observer. The other risks exposure from a place of awareness. What makes this choice difficult is that no one around you will recognize it. From the outside, both paths look the same. Quieter, more reserved, less performative. The difference is internal. Whether your distance is protective or deliberate, here's what most people never realize. Avoidance can disguise itself as depth. You can mistake withdrawal for wisdom. You can call isolation clarity and stillness self-knowledge, while slowly shrinking your capacity to engage with the world at all. This is why this moment matters. Because if you don't choose consciously, your psyche will default to what feels safest, not what is truest. And safety, at this level of awareness, can become a refined form of hiding. The descent has shown you what you are no longer willing to be. Now something else waits. Not to comfort you, but to test whether awareness will remain passive or become integrated. If you don't retreat and you don't regress, something else begins to take form. It isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself as confidence or purpose. It feels more like internal gravity, a sense that your thoughts, actions, and silences are beginning to orbit the same center. You stop explaining yourself, not out of defiance, but because you no longer need external coherence to feel real. Your inner life becomes structured, not chaotic, dense, not noisy. This is emergence. You speak less, but when you do, it lands. Not because you're persuasive, but because your words aren't trying to negotiate approval. They come from a place that has already metabolized doubt. You notice a shift in how you move through situations. You don't rush intimacy. You don't chase outcomes. You let things reveal themselves, and you respond only when something aligns with the internal architecture that has been forming quietly beneath the surface. What others feel around you changes too. Some experience relief, others discomfort. You're no longer reacting in ways they can predict or manipulate. You're present, but not available in the old way. Internally, the fragmentation settles. The roles dissolve further, replaced by something less theatrical and more stable. You're no longer performing strength or sensitivity. Both exist without effort. This doesn't make life easier. It makes it cleaner. There's less inner contradiction, less need to override yourself. When you say yes, it's full. When you withdraw, it's without resentment. You begin to recognize that what you went through didn't refine you into something more acceptable. It stripped you down to something more precise. And precision changes how you choose, how you commit, how you endure. This is the stage few reach, because it requires staying conscious without retreating and engaging without illusion. Not healed, not fixed. Integrated enough to stand in the world without asking it to soften first. This is where I stop speaking about it, because what comes next can't be absorbed passively. You've seen the arc, the threshold, the internal shift, the cost, the consequences, the choice, and what begins to emerge when awareness is no longer used as armor. From here, most people pause, not because they're incapable, but because continuing would require structure, repetition, confrontation without spectacle. Awareness alone can carry you far, but eventually, it circles itself. The next problem is subtle. How to live from this integrated center daily without drifting back into isolation or dissolving into performance again. That isn't something a video can hold. So I built something quieter, a short, contained process. 7 days, no motivation, no affirmation, just deliberate psychological movement, one step at a time. It's called 7-Day Path to Individuation, not a solution, a container. If you're done consuming insight and ready to sit with it, methodically, without escape, you'll know where to find it. If not, close this here. Either way, choose consciously. Most never do.